All right, let's talk about Trey Lance, a guy who is, hey, who knows? Maybe he'll end up working out someday, but as of right now, certainly did not work out for the team that traded 3 first-round picks to get him. 49ers obviously traded 3 first-round picks for the number 3 overall pick, where they selected Trey Lance, who, barely played for them. 49ers fans aren't complaining too much, right? They're doing all right. Brock Purdy's worked out well for them. But I thought it'd be interesting to go back, make a video, and talk about why didn't Trey Lance work out. So I'm going to use a lot of college footage, but first I wanted to see what were people saying about him coming out of college. Like, what was his draft profile? If you look at his Walter Football page, which is a fun site to use for draft evaluations, have a pretty good backlog. So if you ever want to know, hey, why did that 2019 player not work out? Search their name in Walter Football, it'll come up. I'm not paid to promote Walter Football, just a site I like to use, and I like to give shout outs. One of their sites I like to use. His weaknesses was raw. I mean, that's an obvious one, right? He barely had any playing time. The amount of passes he threw was not a lot. Lacks experience, field vision, locks on to primary read, takes off running when first read is covered, slow to work through progressions, has to speed up through the process, needs to get comfortable throwing into tight windows. You might be sitting here and saying, well, that's like all of football, isn't it? Like, that's a lot of weaknesses to have. Well, let's watch the film and we can kind of understand why he was considered such a high prospect, but also why he was moved on from so quickly. And worth mentioning as well, it's not like a team traded a first-round pick to get him. I mean, even Josh Rosen got a second-round pick, only a fourth-round pick really as a backup for Dallas and maybe a plan B if Prescott decides to go somewhere else this offseason. But let's get into the film. Real quick, just stepping in to remind everyone that I have a movie channel. Check out my movie channel if you want. It's Jackson Kruger Movies. The link is in the description below, so if you're tired of just hearing my bad sports takes and want to also hear some bad movie takes, make sure you check that out. Again, link is in the description below. First, let's start off with something like this, where, one thing that people really did like about him was his running ability, and it was a real thing. I mean, for one thing, just designed runs, which North Dakota State loved to run. You're going to see him, fake a handoff, keeps the ball himself. Right here, you see how this play is designed, is working out as designed. One of the real benefits of having a rushing quarterback is just you can scheme stuff up where the rushing quarterback doesn't even have to make a great play and it can just work out. Like, I think that's what, we saw Shanahan do that with Robert Griffin III back in the day, right? Here, Trey Lance does a good job, picks up the first down. Maybe could have slid, but still, a good job there to pick up the first down on a 3rd down and 4. Not a superstar level play or anything, but that's not to say he didn't have superstar level plays in the rushing game. Usually they weren't with designed runs, but instead more so stuff like this where it's man coverage, which, means that there's going to be a lot of defenders who are looking at the player they're supposed to cover and not looking at the quarterback that could be running with the football. So, when Lance takes the snap, that's kind of what happens, is he is going to step up and, not a lot of James Madison players around him, and he gets to this point where he's in a pretty good spot. But also, watch what he does after that point. He runs by everyone and gets into the end zone for a touchdown. So, it wasn't just that he, they ran design runs and he was fine there. He did legitimately show some real flashes in this kind of stuff. He did. But a lot of it was stuff like this. This was a lot of what we saw in the passing game, I thought, from Trey Lance was, way this play is designed to work, zone coverage, that route should hopefully get a lot of attention. James Madison should pay attention to that. So then when a tight end runs kind of where, the corner was for James Madison, hopefully the corner isn't there. No one picks up the tight end. You can get a touchdown. When Lance takes the snap, you're going to see him, run this play action, throws down the field, and that's kind of exactly what happened. This play worked as designed, but a lot of people kind of felt like this is actually a good scheme fit for Kyle Shanahan because, well, that's what he wants to have happen, right? He's going to try and scheme stuff up, and what he wants is just a guy who can do a decent job at, throwing to the open guy. That's what Lance does, It wasn't a perfectly accurate throw, we'll be honest, but hey, still was able to get it to the open guy. This next play, though, really shows two things that we saw from Lance. The first being, so again, let's set up the play. It's zone coverage. You first have, again, a clear out route. Try to, get these James Madison players out of the area. And this time it's the halfback who's hopefully going to get open. That's the way this play is designed to work. Again, this is kind of what we saw from Lance, which is just run the offense. It's usually pretty simple stuff because if you don't know much about North Dakota State, they're essentially like the greatest dynasty in sports. They win the national championship in like Division I AA is what it's called, basically every year. Like they're very good here. And here you see the first thing, guy gets wide open, and the second thing, Trey Lance missing the throw. Like, that happened. He missed throws in college. You really did see that. He was not a finished product. And even when he was in an easy situation, things didn't always work out. I remember back in that draft evaluation process not being overly impressed with Trey Lance as a prospect. I didn't love the decision to draft him with the 3rd overall pick. Granted, I thought they should have drafted Mac Jones, who also wouldn't have been great. So, not bragging, just saying I remember having those concerns at the time. That's not just a looking back in hindsight. In foresight, there were those concerns as well. I think people just liked the potential of Trey Lance. And in fairness, that's not a terrible move either. To me, what I think the 49ers did was they essentially said, the idea of you is a superstar level player. I have no idea if you're going to be a superstar level player, but you know what? If you can get a guy who has potential to be a superstar level player, that's honestly probably worth a number 3 overall pick, even if like the downside is they can't even beat out Sam Darnold to be a backup, right? So I do get the logic behind this. I really do. It's similar to what the Colts did with Anthony Richardson. Now, Richardson's a better athlete than Trey Lance, but I would still say that is the kind of logic behind it. What I also find interesting about all of this is I do wonder, for the Dallas Cowboys, I don't think Trey Lance is out of the league quite yet. I mean, they traded a 4th-round pick for him, and the Dallas Cowboys decided to not extend Dak Prescott. The reports are they will not until after this season, so I don't think the Cowboys are saying we don't need Dak Prescott, we have Trey Lance, but I do wonder if it comes to them not keeping Dak Prescott, this could be, an option. Maybe not your number 1 option, but an option. So I don't think his career is over and done just yet, because there were some good things. I mean, he did do a pretty good job at getting to the guy, to throw to the guy pretty quickly. I just think he is someone that probably was an example of falling in love with the hype as opposed to just, what are you right now? And it's kind of funny because you compare him to Brock Purdy, and Brock Purdy was a pretty solid quarterback in college. A lot of people were just concerned that, like, what he was doing wouldn't work at the NFL level. And so it's just kind of interesting that they basically went after the rawest prospect available in Trey Lance. And then it was a guy who was just like, a good player who maybe, for Brock Purdy, a lot of people felt like he didn't have the, NFL arm and stuff like that, but he's just been able to make it work. Sometimes it's an example of like, hey, sometimes just get the player who's better at football. And again, Trey Lance's numbers were great and all that, but he was, playing for North Dakota State, who every quarterback's numbers there are great. It's just kind of how it works. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think the conclusion I would come to, kind of how I feel about all of this, is I am not going to sit here and say you should never draft a Trey Lance type prospect, but I think that when you draft a Trey Lance type prospect, you have to be fully aware that they could be a bust. That's just totally in the cards and something that could happen. I also am not really a fan of trading multiple first-round picks to get a guy like him. I would rather have, 3 shots at the quarterback as opposed to, spending all 3 of those darts on one better dart at the dartboard, right? That's kind of how I view it. But yeah, it's an interesting move, but those are my thoughts on it. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.